Hey everyone, what's going on? I know there's a ton of stuff going on in the media right now, but in this video, I want to kind of backtrack to some old information and just explain a little bit more of an evolution of gematria that a lot of people don't seem to quite understand. There is something with this knowledge that has to do with a stream of consciousness. It's important. You can understand patterns through a stream of consciousness. And what I mean by this is that maybe there's a story in the news about the restaurant Hardee's. And the first thing that comes to your mind is that when you were a kid, you read the Hardy Boys books, right? So you start looking into the Hardy Boys and you realize that them books are related to that story about Hardee's, the restaurant. And then a month later, there's a story about the writer of the Hardy Boys in the news, and then Jeff Hardy, the wrestler, dies or something of the sort, right? There's a stream of consciousness, but you have to understand that although the restaurant Hardee's to you made you think of the Hardy Boys books, to somebody else, the word Hardee's might be something completely different. There might be somebody, maybe they think of that country singer guy named Hardy with whatever the song is, These Boots or something, right? That there's like and then they figure out a pattern with that guy and connect it to the restaurant Hardee's, right? And then there's these other things that go on. There is a stream of consciousness. Nothing has to be set in stone. Everyone can use this knowledge and understand future patterns and so on by following the things that they can connect to it. And that includes gematria. And even if something is wrong, maybe growing up, I really don't know anything about the Hardy Boys. I don't know why I'm using this as an example either. It's just odd. But maybe one of the Hardy Boys' names were like David Hardy. But then you hadn't read him in years. And you went back and you looked at the book and all of a sudden the guy's name's Daniel Hardy. And you're like, you've been connecting it with the gematria of David Hardy this whole time. And that's how you connected the whole thing. And then, of course, a week later, the guy who wrote the Hardy Boys books was in the news, So no matter that you did the gematria wrong, the pattern still existed. And that's what I'm saying in this video. The gematria helps guide you to this, with a stream of consciousness. It helps you understand these patterns. Even if the gematria is wrong, it's still important because that's how you see the knowledge. And you don't have to connect every single thing to the Jesuits and the Freemasons and whatever. It doesn't necessarily prove that they are responsible just because these things line up. And that doesn't mean that I don't think the Catholic Church is important, and I don't think that there's, definitely some type of cabal entity that is ruling the world, AI. There's something definitely going on in this world, but like I said, just because something connects to it, and over and over and over even, it doesn't necessarily prove that they're responsible. It could be something else that is making you understand that pattern and then you're gathering that belief because it's connected to that, but it doesn't, just because it's connected doesn't prove that that is who is responsible, for one. But everybody, so we can all have these programmed beliefs of a number, right? So, every time someone sees a 201, they just instantly connect it to the Jesuits. And sure, there's a huge pattern with 201 of the Jesuits, but it doesn't mean that every time you see a 201 that is just absolutely the media coding the story to the Jesuits, and the Jesuits are coding the story and using magic to rule over you and whatever. You could see that 201 as something completely different. Maybe it was something to do with the 201st episode of South Park and some random thing they said on that episode. And you know what I mean? Everybody has a different way to see this knowledge. And so many people don't quite get this. And it's really hard to explain because I see this bigger picture with it. And I also see how there's obviously something going on with, manipulating the stories of the news and how they link up. But I don't know my full belief on what is actually going on. And that's why it's so hard to make these videos and fully just come out and say, everything's the Jesuits, everything is this, everything is that. I think we need to really understand what this knowledge is, and that's kind of the point of this video, just to show people, once again, how following your stream of consciousness can lead you to patterns that shouldn't make sense, but they do make sense. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to move on, but I want to go back to 2019 and just explain something. So in 2019, I was following this big pattern with the date August 31st, which just so happens to be today. And oddly enough, my second son was born on this day, and he wasn't expected to be born on this day, but I had also been watching NASCAR and the country France, and I kept pointing out these connections to France and NASCAR, and I thought that we were going to get a death in racing connected to August 31st. And of course, on August 31st, we got the death of this racer from France named Antoine Hubert. And I'm going to go back and explain why all this was, but I actually did the wrong gematria to understand this pattern, and a racer from France actually still died, even though part of the reason that I was following this was because I was doing the gematria of NASCAR completely wrong. I was using the Francis Bacon ciphers, and NASCAR, I was writing it out like this. And Francis Bacon ciphers are important to capital letters, so NASCAR should have been written out with all capital letters, but I figured out this pattern using it the wrong way, and it still panned out. And then later on, it was even connected to the coronavirus vaccine, and the first people in England to get the coronavirus vaccine that I will explain here. But let me go back and just explain the evolution of this story, right? How it all came to. So in December of 2018, somebody had asked me to do an interview, and then it was a weird interview. I mean, I kind of understand what they wanted from me now. They didn't want me to decode like Zach. They were kind of they wanted me to just, break away. It wasn't necessarily for me to go against him, which I have no real reason to, and I'm not making this video to do that, and so on. I'm not trying to make enemies, anything. I'm just trying to explain my evolved understanding of this knowledge. You know what I'm saying? Oh, and that doesn't mean that I'm better than anybody or that I don't have more to learn. I'm trying to explain these things that I've came to understand over studying not just gematria over the years, just esoteric knowledge in general. But I didn't end up doing this interview, but I went to this person's channel, and I noticed they made a bunch of videos about like France and Napoleon, and I was just interested because I was going to do the interview at one point, or just whatever, a live stream or whatever it was, and I was like, that'd be interesting to know a bunch of stuff about France when I come onto this, channel, so I can tell, well, you have a bunch of videos about Napoleon and France, and as I looked up France and so on, and I noticed that Napoleon was born on the 227th day of the year, and if you wrote out French Revolution, it equaled 227, and if you wrote out French monarchy, it equaled 227, and the French Revolution began by an assembly of the Estates General on the date on 5/5, but if you wrote out Estates General, it equaled 227, and the following year after this interview in 2019, on August 10th, it was going to be the 227th anniversary of the French monarchy falling. And it was also interesting because I had covered this Nice, France truck attack, I guess is what it's called. The Nice, France truck van attack on Bastille Day in 2016, but that was on the 227th anniversary of the storming of the Bastille. So I was like, this year's going to be the 227th anniversary of the French monarchy falling. And it was even more interesting because that date, the French monarchy actually fell on August 10th. And for months leading up to this, we were following the dates August 10th and August 11th of 2019, because that is when Tisha B'Av had fell. I can't even type it here. But the Gematria community was like really big with these two dates, Tisha B'Av in 2019, August 10th, August 11th. And I started thinking, that's really interesting. Tisha B'Av begins on the 227th anniversary of the French monarchy falling. French monarchy's 227, French Revolution 227. Napoleon was born on the 227th day of the year. And I later found out it was actually also World Lion Day. And that's interesting because Napoleon, his name actually means Naples lion. And the Antoine Hubert guy who died, actually, this guy, he just so happened to be from Lyon, France, right? Like a lion, France. And he was born on the anniversary of the French Republic and a bunch of stuff that I'll get to here in a second. But, you know, World Lion Day and Lyon, France is like, you can't make this stuff up. So anyway, I was following a whole bunch of stuff with NASCAR after this. And we got the story about Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s mother dying in April. And she died really in connection to Dale Earnhardt Jr. It was like 194 days after his birthday. 194 days after his birthday. And his real name equals 194. And he had turned 44 years old, which was interesting because if you wrote out his mom's name, her name was Brenda, that equaled 44, and the word Jackson equals 44. So her name Brenda, 44. Her last name Jackson, 44. If you wrote out Earnhardt, it equals 44. And then she died of cancer, and cancer equals 44. Chemo, 44. Cigarettes, 44. Kill, this big pattern with the number 44, cancer. His mom dies of cancer when he's age 44, right? And, you know, just all this other stuff. Then a few days after she died, we got this story that Dale Earnhardt Jr. was going to be driving his father's original car, the one that he debuted in, the Hellman's mayonnaise car. His father debuted in this car, and he was going to be driving it at an Xfinity race on August 31st. And I noticed that this story came out 4 months and 4 days before that race at the Xfinity race. And Xfinity equals 144. And it was the Hellman's mayonnaise car, Hellman's 44. He was 44 years old, right? All the stuff with the number 44. And then, of course, think how the number 44 we've often associated with death and so on, right? And then cancer. And think how Dale Earnhardt's father, Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s father, Dale Earnhardt, he had died at the Daytona 500, right? He died at the age of 49, and it was on the 49th day of the year. No, I wrote it in here somewhere. Yeah, he died on the 49th day of the year at the age of 49. I noticed that NASCAR, the Cup Series, also began in 49. And if you went from the day that his mother died, it was 4 months and 9 days before August 31st. And in these Francis Bacon ciphers, it was in the race on August 31st was going to be held in Darlington. And Darlington equaled 227. And that's interesting because this is this number connected to France, right? But 227 is also the 49th prime number. So I was like, man, this seems to be really, really, really linked up to, a death that is connected to NASCAR and racing and so on. And then as I was looking up racing and NASCAR or whatever, I found that the founder of NASCAR was actually a guy named Bill France. And I was like, what are the odds? A guy named Bill France was the founder of NASCAR? So I knew there was something important to France and how it linked up to NASCAR. And it's just interesting, I was spelling, I used this, Darlington with the 227 and so on. But if you wrote out NASCAR, and it's like I said, it's supposed to be all capital letters, but I wrote it out this way. And what stuck out to me right away was the number 111, because Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s mother had just died on the date or she died 111 days after her birthday, and Dale Earnhardt equals 111, and his sister's name equals 111, and NASCAR that way equaled 111. But also I saw that NASCAR equaled 82, and I thought, man, that's interesting because you got Bill France, who equals 82, and he died at the age of 82, and he died 111 days before his birthday. Just like how NASCAR is written with, a capital N only, but it's supposed to be all capital letters. I was like, that's crazy how it all links up, and it's linked up to France. There has to be this connection to France and this Darlington race, and so on with NASCAR. And then once again, on that day, we got the death of the French racer, and, it's just craziness. The French racer, and he was from Lyon, France, Lyon, like lion. And not too long before this guy died, we had the Dale Earnhardt Jr. was even in a plane crash. Let's see if I can write it out here. Dale Earnhardt Jr. was even in a plane crash just before that guy died. And he was in a plane crash on none other than Napoleon's birthday, the 227th day of the year. And he crashed at Elizabethton Airport. And what was interesting is I had pointed out too how on August 31st, that was the 22nd anniversary of Princess Diana dying. And Princess Diana died in a car crash in France. And even funnier yet was 227 days before the anniversary of Princess Diana dying, Prince Philip got into a car wreck. So 227 days before, all linked up to the royal family and so on. And it was on the 22nd anniversary of Princess Diana dying in France. And of course, if you look up Antoine Hubert, see if I can find my thing here, but I'll type it out again. Antoine Hubert. So it's the 22nd anniversary. Antoine Hubert, born on the 22nd of September, which means he died 22 days before his birthday, and he was age 22 on the 22nd anniversary of Princess Diana dying. And the guy who crashed into him was this guy, Juan Manuel Correa, or however you say it, but that means, look at his birthday, August 9th. So this guy crashed into the 22-year-old 22 days after his birthday, and it was 22 days before this guy's birthday, and this guy, the guy who died, and he was 22 years old, and his birthday's on the 22nd of September, which is also the 227th anniversary of the French monarchy, or the French Republic that year. So, it was all just stupidly linked up. But it's interesting that part of the reason that I kept following that pattern was because of Bill France, right? The guy who founded NASCAR. And then I saw how his name synced up to the Francis Bacon ciphers, and I followed the Francis Bacon ciphers like crazy in 2019. That's when I really learned the importance of it, linked up to August 11th and August 10th and this whole narrative. And just kind of like, what are the odds that, he would die at age 82, his name equals 82, and he dies 111 days before his birthday. And this is the improper way to do NASCAR. And I guess you could say that I saw the pattern before that, but seeing the Bill France thing just really made me, and seeing how the Francis Bacon ciphers, Francis Bacon, was linked up to it, I was like, man, this has to be connected to August 31st. And once again, we got the death of Antoine Hubert, and look at Antoine Hubert, his name's 318 in the Francis Bacon ciphers. And what's funny about that is that that's the day that he died, 31/8. And it's interesting his name's 212 in the Francis Bacon cipher as well, because if you write out NASCAR with all capital letters, it equals 212. And that's the way it should have been. So I'll leave this little narrative here, and I'll come back and explain it a little bit more in depth of why this capitalization is important, using all capital letters. Which is interesting because it's something I've recently been talking about too, with Donald Trump and the Capitol insurrection and Jerusalem and making Jerusalem the capital of Israel. But Donald Trump's 424, and, his wife just died 4 months and 24 days after her birthday, and Donald Trump's name in the Hebrew lettering is 424, and he touched the Western Wall at 424. See my previous videos, But it's interesting, it's with all capital letters, just like how NASCAR is supposed to be all capital letters. But it comes back to this because in December of 2020, we then got the people who got the first vaccine. And I'd been following the Francis Bacon ciphers and seeing all of these connections. And the first person or lady in the UK to get it was named Margaret Keenan. And if you wrote out her name in the Francis Bacon ciphers, it equals 264. And if you wrote out COVID-19 like this, with COVID lowercase, it equals 264. And if you write out vaccine, it equals 264. And also interesting is they said that the first man to get it there, his name was William Shakespeare. And, William Shakespeare of all people. But in the truth community, a lot of people for years have been talking about how William Shakespeare is actually the same as Francis Bacon, right? Francis Bacon is actually William Shakespeare and so on. Look this up. I'm telling you, it's been like a conspiracy thing that people have talked about in the conspiracy theory movement for as long as I can remember, that Francis Bacon is actually William Shakespeare and so on. But notice how William Shakespeare, his birthday was April 26th, which in England they would write that as 26/4, 264. And then he has that connection to Francis Bacon, and the word vaccine equals 264, and the first lady to get it equals 264, and COVID-19 with lowercase equals 264. And they made sure to tell us that the Margaret Keenan lady was from Coventry, which also ties back to William Shakespeare, right? Coventry, the town Coventry. And I didn't think much of it. I was wondering, I was like, man, that is some crazy stuff. It's just absolutely connected and so on. And a week later or so, I realized I was researching more about COVID-19 or something to try to find some connections and so on. And as I was looking at it, I realized that COVID is actually supposed to be all capital letters. So it was odd that COVID-19 like this would equal 264, links up to vaccine and links up to the First Lady and links up to William Shakespeare. But it's actually supposed to be, COVID, all whatever, like that, right? COVID-19. And that doesn't link up, but look at how look how it links up using the capital letters, 212, just how COVID equals 212. And also 82, right? Like the NASCAR number. Look at NASCAR, 212. Remember how they said the first one in the first case or whatever was in Seattle, Washington, that equals 264 in the United States and 212. And if you want to go even further with the Queen Elizabeth and so on, Queen Elizabeth got her COVID vaccine 264 days after her birthday, and her name also equals 264. Think about England and William Shakespeare and Margaret Keenan, and the word vaccine's 264. But anyway, when I realized that I was doing this wrong, that I was writing COVID wrong, right, in lowercase letters, I went back and I looked up my old post where I had realized that I had been doing NASCAR wrong. And it was this post from September 19th, 2019. Let me just find it really quick. Mike Stefanik. Or Stefanik, however you say this guy's name. So yeah, like I said, I'm trying to explain this in a better way, but so I realized that I was doing COVID in lowercase letters and it needed to be all capital letters. And in 2019, after Antoine Hubert died, I had also realized that somebody pointed out that I was doing NASCAR wrong, and it's important to capital letters, and I thought, man, how am I doing this wrong, but the pattern's still synced up, and it's supposed to be this way. And in this blog post here, I wrote about this guy dying in a plane crash, Mike Stefanik. So he died in a plane crash just after Dale Earnhardt was in a plane crash, linked up to Antoine Hubert and so on. And, his name equaled 111. That number connected to NASCAR, even though in the lowercase version, right? And I don't know if he drove the monster car or whatever, but he died in Sterling, Connecticut. That equaled 111. It was at the airport that equaled 82. It was all linked up to my erroneous writing of NASCAR with a cap or lowercase letters. So I was like, what are the odds of that, But what's so interesting is the point I'm trying to make is what's so interesting is that for whatever reason, I highlighted the word Coventry in all capital letters in this post because this plane left from Coventry, Rhode Island. And for whatever reason, I wrote Coventry in all capital letters. I was like, this has to be important that I wrote it in all capital letters. 2 years before I realized that COVID was supposed to be all capital letters. And I still don't know why I did this, but think about, once again, Coventry, William Shakespeare, Margaret Keenan. I mean, it's just unbelievable that I would do this. And, then for the odds that COVID would be the same, like 212 and so on, as NASCAR, it's just, you just can't even make it up. But anyway, I guess the point that I'm making is that although I was doing it wrong, the gematria was still absolutely linking up, and I was following a stream of consciousness that helped me understand that there was, a death connected to August 31st that year in 2019. And it was linked up to all of the news stories that were going on were linked up to the exact same pattern that I was following, even though a lot of the gematria that I was doing wasn't even right. And then later on, I know, the same thing happened when I realized that I was doing COVID-19 wrong, and it was linking up to this number 264 like crazy, and linking up to the First Lady and so on. But then I realized I was doing it wrong, and when I realized I was doing it wrong, it was actually all supposed to happen and all, connected back to the same thing, and it was actually right because of this story. It's like, what are the odds I would write Coventry and highlight it in all capital letters in this random post way before I ever realized the connection to COVID and the first people getting it were from Coventry? I'm just saying. And I don't even know. A lot of people could take this 111 and make it mean something connected to the Jesuits. The number 82, it probably means the Jesuit motto or something. And it probably links up to the Jesuit anniversary. But I didn't have to do any of that. And I still figured out a pattern that existed where a guy from France dies in racing. And, Dale Earnhardt Jr. gets in a plane crash, on Napoleon's birthday of all days. And there's a whole bunch more. I've made tons of other videos on this, but I just wanted to come back to it. It just seemed like the perfect day. It was August 31st, and what's kind of sparked it, just to bring it all back up, was this. I made this video, about Home Alone and so on, and Zenith of the Alpha, who's actually the guy who, he turned me on to the Francis Bacon ciphers and the importance of capital letters in like March of 2019, right? And then I was following this big pattern that was connected to the year 2017 with the Big Bang Theory and a whole bunch of stuff, and he pointed out some interesting things with the Francis Bacon ciphers, and I was like, man, that's really interesting. And I was like, it was a Chinese pig year, and I started thinking about, the pig and bacon, and then Francis Bacon, right? And I was talking about how France was important, so I was like, there must be something to pay attention to with these ciphers. And if you go clear back to like 2016 as well, in December of 2016, there was a whole bunch of stuff going on, and it seemed as though they had flipped the script with the stuff we were following with football. And I say they because there's definitely some influence going on with whatever it is that is actually really ruling over our minds in this world. Tons of stuff with that. It was really linked to the Catholic Church. It's part of the reason why I really, really do think that the Jesuits and so on are very important to what's going on. But it still doesn't take away from the fact that every time there's a certain number that's connected to something with the Jesuits, that is what it means, if that makes sense. Eh, you can't just decode that way all of the time, you know? You can't just take any story in the news and then every time there's a 56, say that means Society of Jesus, when there's like countless other meanings, you know, through the stream of consciousness that I'm talking about. It's an, you know, I have like a deeper relationship and understanding of this knowledge. So I'm trying to teach people how to pay attention to, you know, follow your own thoughts with the knowledge and don't just take a preconceived notion of a set of numbers and make them mean a certain thing when you can think about other things that exist around you and connect it to that as well and follow the pattern, you know. But in 2016, like I said, they flipped the script and then we learned reverse gematria, right? Like flipping the alphabet, basically. And there's a whole bunch more that goes with this, but a humongous thing I was following back then was Jeopardy, right? And Alex Trebek and a whole bunch of stuff. Cindy Stowell, this lady who had cancer on Jeopardy, and covered a whole bunch of stuff with that. And in 2019, we then got the news that Alex Trebek had cancer, and then we had this other guy, Jeopardy James, right, who was real big, and he was like that guy who was kicking butt or whatever. And when I started seeing this Jeopardy pattern, I figured that the August 11th event that we were following big time, or the Tisha B'Av, August 10th, August 11th, I figured it was probably important to learning something new with Gematria, a new cipher, and something else. And it turns out that this Francis Bacon cipher was just absolutely linked to countless stories and countless things that were going on with the Tisha B'Av event. And ever since then, I've been following it. And ever since then, these patterns just keep existing with this. And then we got the capital insurrection, right? Teaching us even more so to pay attention to capital letters. And remember, we even had the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, right after the George Floyd thing. They started the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone where they used the pink umbrella as the logo. And of course, after George Floyd, you had that guy wearing had the umbrella or whatever, and he was knocking out the windows in the auto zone that had the spray painted autonomous zone on the side of the building. But this autonomous zone was actually in the area of Seattle, right? It was in Seattle, Washington, Capitol Hill, and it was on the date 6/8, which links up to Seattle, Washington. But if you go from 6/8 to the Capitol insurrection, it's 212 days, right? And remember how Seattle, Washington equals 212, how COVID equals 212, you know, how NASCAR equals 212. But I just want to point it out again. Seattle, Washington, 212, also 68. So just absolutely linked up with all these things, but they were teaching us to pay attention to capital letters, Capitol Hill. And I further know this because it's linked up to Zach, because remember, right before we learned the importance of reverse gematria, that's when the guy named the Umbrella Man had threatened Zach and told him to watch out for Christmas Eve, and then a car crashed through his garage or whatever on Christmas Eve, and that was 186 days before they deleted Zach's first channel in 2017. So this Umbrella Man threatens him, and then on Christmas Eve, a car crashes into his house. But think about the Umbrella Man. 186 days later, they delete Zach's channel on the date 6/28, which is the day leaving 186 days in the year. And it's also Elon Musk's birthday. Elon Reeve Musk equals 186. SpaceX equals 186. It's this humongous number that I've talked about for years with the space theme, right? Neil Armstrong's 186. Apollo 11's 186. Michael Collins, who was on Apollo 11 as well, he just died 186 days after his birthday or something like that, or before his birthday. Just this humongous number. Maybe I'm probably going to make a separate video on this eventually, but with the Artemis 1, because Artemis 1 equals 186 in the Francis Bacon ciphers. But I'm just pointing out the importance to the umbrella symbolism and, you know, and how the Umbrella Man was the one who knocked out the windows at the auto parts store in Minneapolis after George Floyd, and it said autonomous zone. Then they started this Capitol Hill autonomous zone and so on. And if you type out Zach Hubbard and use the Francis Bacon ciphers that are important to capital letters, notice how his name equals 186. So the Umbrella Man threatens him, and then 186 days later, they delete his first channel on the day, leaving 186 days in the year. And if you look up the Umbrella Man, it actually stems back to the JFK assassination. And at the JFK assassination, there was a guy holding an umbrella, right? His name was Louis Witt, that equals 186 in the Francis Bacon. And his full name was Louis Stephen Witt, that equals 186, right? Also 264, which is interesting. So I'm telling you, they've been teaching us, something's been teaching us to pay attention to the importance of capital letters. And even remember on August 11th, the big thing that happened on August 11th, the Tisha B'Av event in 2019, the big thing that happened was the Hong Kong riots. And the Hong Kong riots were important to this thing called the Umbrella Movement in Hong Kong from 2014, right? There was also a story in the news right around that time of a guy getting struck by lightning holding an umbrella. And further, Rambo has talked a lot about the umbrella symbolism and how it represents mind control. And this is why I think another reason is people need to be weary about the way that they are decoding things and always, sure, there might be people or some type of cabal that is, creating the news on purpose for, whatever reason, using the same numbers. And I think that they were possibly, manipulating the minds of people who understand this knowledge and leading us down a certain path to have a certain belief about what is going on. And that is why I really don't think that it's the Jesuits. I think it's something that wants us to think that it is the Jesuits. I think it's a lot deeper than just the Jesuits. And this has been going on way before the Jesuits and so on. And there's tons of other groups and whatever else that you could possibly think it is. I think it's way deeper and something that we don't even understand. But the reason I find this interesting is because remember how Zach had went to LSU and he was educating about the championship with Joe Burrow and all that stuff, and then he was staying in the hotel. You can even read it. It's even in his book, too. He was staying at the hotel called The Trim, that equals 186, and he was in Louisiana, that equals 201, and he was staying at room 201, and this guy kept reaching out to him to tell him to check out event 201 about coronavirus and so on, and his name was Dr. Paul Cottrell, right? That equals 201, and, from then on, everything was, figured out the connection to 201 and the Jesuits and so on. And then now every time there's a 201, it means it's the Catholic Church, according to a lot of people in this community. And it seems that they kind of guided this. This Dr. Paul Cottrell came out of nowhere. Where is he now? Don't even know where. It doesn't make any sense. And maybe it was a weird synchronicity, but it seems that even if it was, he was guided to do that to Zach and so on. He comes out of nowhere. But his video with Zach, if you go look at it, he uses the Resident Evil umbrella on it, right? Which you could just say it was because of coronavirus and the Raccoon City and the umbrella logo. But it's very interesting when you start thinking about, mind control and manipulation with the umbrella and how, to me, I think they're just guiding us down a path to have certain beliefs with gematria, and they just keep creating these stories, and they know that we're just going to keep coding it in a certain way or decoding it in a certain way to connect to something they've taught us. And, that's why we need to have more of the stream of consciousness, not thought, so you can see outside of this bigger narrative and see how you are possibly being manipulated by whatever is going on in this world, right? So, that's how we learned about the number 201 and the Jesuits and so on, right? We're following how coronavirus is linked to Revelation and the Pope, and then this guy starts, going all about 201, and then figure out that Pope Francis's name is 201. He stays at room 201, and event 201 and so on, right? Yeah, it's all connected, but to me, it just seems like that was all meant to be to like lead us down this path, So once again, that's why I make these videos. I want people to think a little deeper about why they have certain beliefs about gematria and such, because I think that there's a bigger level going on that a lot of people are missing, and they're almost being mind controlled in a way, in a sense, to have these beliefs about the way this knowledge works. And I've been doing it a completely opposite way for a long time now, coming up with the same things, talking about the randomest things, and then they're coming up in the media, and it has nothing to do with connecting it to the Jesuits or anything, you know. So, but once again, too, they were teaching us to pay attention to capital letters with this number 186, right? How it links up to the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone with the Capitol Insurrection. Remember, right after the Capitol Insurrection, Zach got bear sprayed too, right? 186 days before or after his birthday. I mean, and then he talked about his girlfriend being Sweet Lady, and why he calls her Sweet Lady. And then a few days later, there was the Myanmar coup, and she's from Myanmar. And it was like 170 days before or after his birthday. And the lady they overthrew, her name was, she was born on the 170th day of the year, and Zachary Keith Hubbard equals 170, and a whole bunch of stuff, you know. The Super Bowl this year, all linked up to Zach. All of these things, like, literally, like, it's almost as if, like, I don't even know how to explain it. There's so many things that are connected to him within this knowledge, and most people just aren't even paying attention because they're not looking any deeper at the relationships, because they think they already know everything they need to know about this knowledge. And it's really a huge, like, you know, punch in the dick to this knowledge, because people are falling behind and not understanding that they too are under a spell. And I don't know, that's why I'm making videos like this, to hopefully awaken some other people to just pay attention a little bit deeper, you know. But anyway, along with the stream of consciousness stuff, let's go back to this comment that Zenith had left me. And the whole point was that he's the one who originally brought up the whole capital letter thing to me. And for some reason, we have this weird, I don't know, a lot of times when he leaves me a comment, it can be even a simple thing, and it somehow, I vibe with that comment a lot more than I resonate with his comment a lot more than other people's. And I don't mean disrespect to other people, but when I see something that he writes a lot of times, it just makes more sense to me. It just, somehow, I can understand a narrative a lot better by understanding things that he's talking about. And I don't know the reason, but he just pointed out to me on this comment, he said, he's talking about Artemis 1, and he said Artemis started in 2017, and the name instantly reminded him of Charlie Sheen. And it's interesting because the new launch of Artemis 1, it's going to be on the date 9/3, which is Charlie Sheen's birthday. And he was talking about Charlie Sheen being in the movie called The Three Musketeers that came out in 1993. But what's interesting is he thought that his character's name was Artemis, but when he looked back at it, it's not Artemis, it's Aramis or Aramis, or however you pronounce that. So he's following the stream of consciousness, even though he's not even right. He's like, he thought it was right, right? And it just absolutely connects here. So, you know, he said he was in the recent news about 2017. Artemis started in 2017. And, you know, Charlie Sheen in Gematria equals 217. Aramis in all capital letters equals 217. And Artemis is set to launch at 217 on Charlie Sheen's birthday. So I was like, man, that is pretty interesting, because the original date was supposed to be on Michael Jackson's birthday, right? And Artemis 1 is supposed to go around the moon, and then later on they're going to have people walk on the moon again. And think about Michael Jackson, who's the moonwalker. And I'll probably make a separate video on this as well, if I get a chance. But, you know, the Michael Jackson, and he's just really, really linked up to Artemis 1. And I made a whole bunch of stuff about Michael Jackson and how it's linked up to this Batman theme and whatever else. But them moving it to the date 9/3, it really makes a lot of sense because that's the 246th day of the year. And if you write out Michael Jackson just so happens to equal 246. And yeah, Catholic Church equals 246. And we're currently in the 246th year of the United States. The Catholic Church has obvious ties to the United States and so on. I totally get it. It's not that I don't think the Catholic Church is involved, right? It's just that we're being led down a path to have a belief that every number with gematria and every number in a story has to mean a certain thing connected to that. And I think there's something bigger within the Catholic Church, or just something that even wants you to believe that it's all the Catholic Church, There's something more going on, But moral of the story, they moved it to 9/3, the 246th day of the year. And Michael Jackson just so happens to equal 246. And that's Charlie Sheen's birthday. But when I saw this comment, I was like, I'm not going to ignore this. That's for years. 2017 was also this big year that I was talking about the kneeling during the national anthem and how it was important to Charles Manson, right? Charles Manson has the helter-skelter theory about black people rising up. So I thought it was interesting with the connection of black people not rising up and black people kneeling, right? And just saying that, we recently had the story about Colin Kaepernick having his first baby and so on. So I know that it's somehow related back to that. But this whole theme in 2017 that I was talking about in October, it stemmed back to like a year before. But I really talked about it a whole lot in October when the kneeling thing got really big again. And then Charles Manson died, like a month later, Charles Manson ended up dying. And we had Harvey Weinstein in the news, and it was linked to Rose McGowan, and Zenith made a whole bunch of videos. I'll leave maybe a playlist or something in the description where he talked about the connection to Charlie and Rose, right? Charlie and Rose, and it had to do with the movie So I Married an Axe Murderer. And I also talked about Charlie Rose. I'm pretty sure in 2017, after Charlie Manson died, he was in the news for sexual allegations or something like that. And, Betty White was important to that Rose theme. And Charlie Sheen was also important with the show 2.5 Men. Because there's the character Rose on there. He's Charlie and the character Rose. So there's like a whole bunch of stuff. I have to go back and review it all. And I know that's connected somehow, and I'm making this video on the whim because I don't know the full connection. But I know that him noticing this, even though it's wrong, is actually right because I'm following a stream of consciousness. You know what I'm saying? And I started thinking about Charlie Sheen and how it connects to Michael Jackson, and it was not even that long ago, maybe less than a year ago, I blogged about the movie Scary Movie and how it is connected to the Mandela effect because Shorty doesn't say, I see white people anymore. He says, I see dead people. And for the life of me, I can't get over that one because it was always, I see white people, and now he says, I see dead people. But I think it's because of that I was thinking of this. When he said Charlie Sheen, I was like, in the one of the Scary Movies, Charlie Sheen actually fights Michael Jackson. And that's just what it reminded me of, was Charlie Sheen fighting Michael Jackson. I was wondering if there's some type of connection. And I'll just show you a short clip here of what I'm going to talk about. But this is Michael Jackson, Charlie Sheen fighting.
How do you like it, huh?
And notice how he's hanging him off the balcony, right? Remember a long time ago, Michael Jackson held his baby over the balcony when he was in Germany, right? He held his baby over the balcony in Germany, and they're doing this in this clip where Charlie Sheen's fighting him. So you know that it's got to be related to that. And Zenith just so happened to look it up. And it was on November 19th, I think, of 2002, which just so happens to be a span of 2 months and 17 days, like 217 after Charlie Sheen's birthday. And remember, this Artemis 1 is going to be launching on Charlie Sheen's birthday at 2/17, and Charlie Sheen in Gematria equals 217. And if you write out Aramis, I think it equals 217. And what else was there? What was the other 217 or was there? Talking about 2017, take out the 0. It's like a 217. Aramis 217, Charlie Sheen 217. Artemis set to launch at 217 on Charlie Sheen's birthday. And it's also important, think about the moon landing and so on. Neil Armstrong actually didn't step foot on the moon until the date 21/7, a lot like 217, which is also Zach's birthday. Once again, another reason why he's connected to that space theme with the number 186 and how Neil Armstrong equals 186. So anyway, we'll see. We'll see if it actually launches on Charlie Sheen's birthday. And it's just so weird because the whole reason that he noticed this was because of his erroneous thought that Charlie Sheen had a different name in the 93 movie, and it still is going to follow through. It still makes sense. And I know that it's even further connected because this whole narrative with Charles Manson that I followed over the years, it all stems back to New Year's Eve on 2016 when Mariah Carey got drunk and lip synced or something like that. And it was a big deal, and that was a story in the news, Mariah Carey. But when I was reading about the story, it talked about Janet Jackson and that Janet Jackson's boob falling out at the Super Bowl in that story. And I didn't think much of it. I was just like, oh, interesting. What's Janet Jackson's boob got to do? It was, I guess 2 women and, something that happened to them, their performance, I guess. That's what the story was about. But like 2 days later, there was a story of Janet Jackson in the news about how she had a baby at the age of 50, and like how Michael Jackson died at the age of 50, and a bunch of stuff. But I noticed that CNN, what they gave me on the headlines, for me at least, it was right next to a story about Charles Manson. And, that's really kind of where the whole Charles Manson narrative started with me. I looked into Charles Manson and I learned about the helter-skelter theory. And Colin Kaepernick had also been in the news for kneeling in 2016. And this was all connected to the Super Bowl and Mariah Carey and, Janet Jackson's boob at the Super Bowl. So I was like, there must be something to the helter-skelter theory and how it links up to Colin Kaepernick taking a knee. And I looked into the Janet Jackson boob thing, and she just so happened to be singing a song from her album called Rhythm Nation 1814 on when her boob fell out or whatever, when Justin Timberlake knocked her boob out or whatever. And she says that she named it that number because that was the year Francis Scott Key wrote the national anthem. And once again, think about the national anthem with Colin Kaepernick and the kneeling symbolism. So I knew there was a relationship somehow with Colin Kaepernick kneeling to Charles Manson. And then the next year was when the kneeling got real big and Donald Trump called out the kneeling. And, the Eagles went on to win the Super Bowl. And the flag was sewn in 239 Arch Street in Philadelphia and a bunch of stuff. But, so I started talking about Charles Manson again. And then, of course, Charles Manson would go on to die. But, think about Janet Jackson, who's the sister of Michael Jackson. So I was like, I just think there has to be some type of relationship here with how Janet Jackson is linked up to how this was originally supposed to be on Michael Jackson's birthday. And then now it's going to be, it's supposed to be held on Charlie Sheen's birthday. And, of course, Michael Jackson also died 40 days after Janet Jackson's birthday. And Michael Jackson died just before the 40th anniversary of the moon landing. And his birthday's 40 days after the anniversary of the moon landing. If you write out Artemis 1, it equals 40. And also in relation to the moon and Michael Jackson, if you write out Michael Jackson, his name equals 83. And when he held the kid off the balcony, he did that in Germany. That equals 83. Germany's 83. And he just so happened to do that 8 months and 3 days after his birthday, a span of 8 months and 3 days after his own birthday. But the word moon equals 83 in the Francis Bacon ciphers. And September 3rd will be 1 month and 13 days after Neil Armstrong stepped foot on the moon on 217, or 21/7, right? And once again, so linked up to the moon. And also Charlie Sheen will be 57 years old on that day, like how Moon's 57. And when he fought Michael Jackson in Scary Movie 3, Scary Movie came out on October 24th, and that is 51 days before Charlie Sheen's birthday. So it's linked up to the moon like no other. Michael Jackson to this number, it's going to be 1 month and 13 days after the moon landing anniversary, right? Charlie Sheen's going to be 57. He fights Michael Jackson in a movie that's the anniversary of that movie is 51 days after Charlie Sheen's birthday. But what makes me think that it's even further connected is that if you go to look at this movie Scream, or just think about Janet Jackson, and she has the song called Scream with Michael Jackson. Right? Her and Michael Jackson made this song called Scream that was on his History album, his Story album, right? I actually used to have this album as a kid. I haven't listened, I don't have it anymore, but it's just interesting. They have a song called Scream, and think about Scary Movie, right? It's like the original one was like a parody of the movie Scream. And hold on one second, I want to see when the new one came out. I forgot there was a new one that came out. I haven't watched it yet. January 14th. I'll come back and look at this in a second, but the old movie Scream, if you look it up, and you read down about the title, let's see here. Well, it's right here in development. It says, as the film neared completion, the Weinstein brothers changed the film's title from Scary Movie to Scream. They were inspired by the Michael Jackson song of the same name. So, the Weinstein brothers, one of them is Harvey, right? And I think even if you go to this Michael Jackson song, it tells you it was Harvey Weinstein had heard the song on the radio. Let's see here. Yeah, the song Scream, despite being known as Scary Movie throughout its production, the 1996 film Scream, directed by Wes Craven, changed its name to Scream after Harvey Weinstein heard Jackson's song on the radio, right? So it's like, let's see here. So literally, the movie Scream was originally going to be called Scary Movie, and then they changed it because of Harvey Weinstein. And Harvey Weinstein, if you remember, he was in the news for his sexual allegations just before Charles Manson died. And Harvey Weinstein, the biggest person going against him was Rose McGowan, right? Rose McGowan. And once again, there's a big theme with Charlie and Rose. And this was linked up to Marilyn Manson and a whole bunch of other stuff that it's just too much to go back and explain. The JFK assassination and the Coma White video, and Marilyn Manson's newest album even involves a rose on it. Manson, I don't remember what his newest album is, but maybe it's not even his newest one anymore. We Are Chaos, though. The hit single on there. Jeez, let me find it here. We Are Chaos. Maybe it's in the music video, but if you go watch the music video, it involves a rose, like coming out of his head or something like that. Let me pull it up. We Are Chaos. And once again, this isn't, Zenith has a playlist somewhere of this, but if you go watch this music video, whatever, I'm just going to skip over it. You can come and look at it. There's definitely a rose theme that is involved, and it's just interesting to me thinking about the song Scream and how it connects to Janet Jackson with the 2017 narrative with Harvey Weinstein, and also Charles Manson had just died right around that same time. And then Rose McGowan, Charlie and Rose. Marilyn Manson had just released his album called We Are Heaven Upside Down in October of 2017 as well. And it was all about the number 10, and it had the song called You Say God and I Say 10 on it. Say the number 10. Well, if you look up the Gematria, God equals 10, and Satan equals 10, and it's a humongous number, The 10th triangular is 55. God and Satan both equal 55. And then what are the odds, that, it's just what are the odds that Charlie Sheen would fight Michael Jackson in one of the Scary Movie films? Janet Jackson linked to Scream, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out this narrative, but the underlying meaning of what I want to show in this video is that, the whole reason that we even realized, or Zenith even realized, the connection to Charlie Sheen here with this is the fact that, Artemis reminded him of Charlie Sheen in the movie Three Musketeers. And it's not even his name in the movie, but it's absolutely connected up to Charlie Sheen. It's like, he followed a thing and it just happened to him. Like, it's like, that's why it's important, even if it's wrong. But if that's what you really thought it was, you need to pay attention to that. Because even if you're wrong, it could still lead you down the path to understanding a narrative. So if I figure out more, I'll definitely make another video more in depth on this topic, because I haven't even made a blog post on it and really even looked that much into it. It just inspired me to make a video to show the point that I'm trying to make. And before I even end the video, Charlie Sheen, there's a lot of interesting things with Charlie Sheen too. He's in the movie Red Dawn about the Russian invasion. And if you remember in 2015, right before the Paris attacks, right, Charlie Sheen announced that he had HIV or whatever, and then he said he had tiger's blood, right, and this is the Chinese Tiger Year, and right around that same time we had the Missouri Tiger hunger strike that was going on. There was a lot of tiger symbolism back then that was linked up to France, and France is really important. I've been talking about France to this year as well, with the number 229, so it's almost the 230th year of the French Republic, It will be that in 21 days now. But there's just still something linked up to France. But, think about Charlie, right? And then Charlie Hebdo in France. There was the Charlie Hebdo attack in 2015 in January. And then we had the ISIS attack on November 13th in 2015. That was all linked up to Pope Francis's visit to the United States. And I'm just wondering, I also connected it to Prince Charles back then. Charlie and Prince Charles, whose birthday is 11/14. And I'm just wondering in regards to this, because I had just talked about Apollo 12 and how Apollo 12 was struck by lightning twice while taking off, and it was linked up to that lightning that struck near the White House on Obama's birthday and so on. But Apollo 12 actually launched on Prince Charles's birthday in 1969. So Charlie, Charles Manson, just makes me think there's something important to, this, how it all relates to the moon theme and so on. And you know what else? Something else I didn't point out with the umbrella symbolism. Think about the Kennedy Space Center. And think about JFK and the Umbrella Man, right? That there's absolutely a big connection with umbrellas, the Umbrella Man, and how it's linked up to, JFK, Kennedy Space Center, linked up to the space stuff. Umbrellas can block the sun, right? Like an eclipse. Eclipse important to the moon. Just trying to think. Charlie. Can't remember. There was something else important to Charlie around that time of 2015 too. I'll have to go back and look. There's something. I just can't remember what it was. There's Charlie Sheen. Charlie Sheen even said he had HIV, and that wasn't too long after the VMAs, where Taylor Swift's biggest song was Bad Blood, and that was related to this other theme I was following with Kanye West and the color gray. And speaking of Wes Craven and the movie Scream, right? Wes Craven actually died that year in 2015 on the same day as the VMAs. And I was following a huge pattern with Freddie Gray and how it linked up to Kanye West talking crap to Taylor Swift or whatever, and then he ended up dying on the same day as the VMAs that year. Wes Craven. But Freddie Gray was linked up to Freddy Krueger, and this guy's the guy who wrote it, so it's pretty interesting that he would also be important to the film Scream. So there's a lot. And, there's so much going on here. See this date here, a date I've been watching, which 1812 makes me think of, once again, the War of 1812 and the national anthem being written during the War of 1812 in Baltimore. Scream even has Rose McGowan in it. I didn't even realize that. Haha. Hold on. Crazy. I haven't seen that movie since probably high school. Or I wasn't even in high school yet, but... See, it even talks about Harvey Weinstein here, huh? I didn't realize she was in the movie Scream. But... when did the new one come out? It was January 14th, wasn't it? I just want to look really quick. 1/14/2022 to 9/3. 7 months and 20 days, like the moon landing. On 7/20, huh? It's interesting. What is it to 8/29 then? It's interesting too that it doesn't necessarily have to connect, but once again, following the stream of consciousness, it's interesting that I really started this video off talking about that number with France and the importance to France, and then it's 227 days before Michael Jackson's birthday. So let's see, let's go from the moon landing. 187 days. I mean, it is interesting. 187 days to that day. And, you just had like what's his face? Mikhail Gorbachev die 187 days after the war in Ukraine started. I mean, I'm not saying that these numbers aren't necessarily connected to the Jesuits, but once again, it just doesn't necessarily prove it is because of the Jesuits that the numbers are connected to them. You know what I mean? Like, could be. I'm not saying it isn't for sure, but what I'm saying is I really think we're being led down a path to kind of see these things. And, the space theme is really, think about Kennedy and the Catholic stuff too. It is related. There is a whole lot of interesting connections, and the moon landing being on the 201st day of the year. It's, Buzz Aldrin's birthday's 20/1, Neil Aldrin Armstrong 201, Apollo 201. They are related, at least through gematria. What does Scream equal in gematria? Scream equals 40 as well. Think about Michael Jackson in the song Scream, right? Janet Jackson. Michael Jackson dies 40 days after Janet Jackson's birthday, before the 40th anniversary of the moon landing, and his birthday's 40 days after the anniversary of the moon landing. That's interesting. Scream in all capital letters. Nothing sticks out that much to me. Janet Jackson's 201. I'll have to look more into this, but just felt like making a video here. Even more interesting, Rose McGowan's in that movie. I'll have to go back and watch this movie even. Maybe there's something important that happens in the movie that I don't remember. It's been a long time since I watched it. Scream. I wanted to look up the song Scream again. It's May 29th. JFK's birthday. So yeah, there's definitely a connection here. Interesting. May 29th. And really, you could go further and even talk about Catholic priests molesting kids and think about Michael Jackson with all the molesting kids allegations and so on, too. And then think about Harvey Weinstein, the sexual allegations. Go back and watch that video, too. Rewatch it. Maybe there's something important to it. But even like JFK, JFK and the Francis Bacon's 51, like conspiracy and, tinfoil hat and so on, right? 9/11's also 51. Like, it seems like these phrases were even created. They're phrases that, like, oh, what's one of the big phrases with 9/11? It's inside job or whatever, right? Inside job, 156. It's like, 9/11 is the 156 prime number and so on. It's like they programmed, like, even the truth community with these certain phrases that are linked up with gematria. You know what I mean? So, it's interesting. Like, JFK is 51 and moon is 51. All these things that have to do with, conspiracy is linked up to the number 51. Think about the movie Zeitgeist and how big that was with a lot of people. Zeitgeist is 51. It's like all of these things seem to be purposely created to create a truth community that they have now controlled, even with the gematria stuff, So it's not to say that there isn't something going on, but it seems that they have created certain things, even in the gematria community, to like kind of rule over whatever's, rule over and guide the community in a certain way. And like I said, I've been paying attention to it forever and watching all these things go on within the community and how they're related and how we're being guided down a certain path. And I'm trying to tell people this, and it seems like people don't want to hear it just as much as they don't want to hear what you're talking about with gematria, But like I said, hopefully I'll make another couple videos here. I really do want to talk about like the Michael Jackson and the Artemis 1 stuff, even Mikhail Gorbachev, because this guy, I even have blog posts where I talked about this guy's birthday. I didn't realize he was born on 3/2, but I talked about how it's connected to Russia, because that's 424 days. His birthday is 4 months and 24 days after Vladimir Putin's birthday, right? And I've been talking about 424 like crazy. That day is also 424 days before the donations dinner, where Lev Parnas, the guy who just went to jail 4 months and 24 days after his birthday, told Donald Trump that his name equaled 424 in the Hebrew gematria. Of course, Donald Trump's 424 in all capital letters and so on. So that date, Mikhail Gorbachev's birthday, is really important. And not only did they tell Donald Trump his name was 424, they told him he was like the savior of Ukraine. And think about Russia and Ukraine, and I mean, it's definitely deep. Of course, he dies 6 months and 2 days before his birthday, and Soviet Union equals 62, and he died age 91, which is a huge number with the space theme we've talked about for years. Space 91, rockets 91, asteroid 91. The space race came to an end in 91. And there was all kinds of 91s. I can't remember it. Donald Trump started like the Space Force, that equals 91. And it's just a huge number with the space theme. And, and think about this moon thing. And think about the Cold War. Think about Artemis 1, right? The moon. Russia. The United States. The Cold War. Now, Russia's invading Ukraine. Now we get the Soviet Union guy who dies, like, at the age of 91. Soviet Union equals 186. The big number I'm talking about with the space stuff. I mean, it's just, you can't even make it up. But I'll leave it there. Sorry, I'm just rambling now, but there's just so much other stuff. Hopefully I will have time. I have like 4 band gigs starting Friday, and I have to work in between there too, so who knows? We will see if I have time. It might be next week before I make some of these videos, but we'll see if I get time on Friday in the afternoon or something. There's a lot of stuff going on. This twin narrative, synced up to Batman, and I think that it's connected to either the Astros or the Mets to be in the World Series too. There's just something really connected to them, and a hurricane symbolism, and that Batman movie saying there's a storm coming, Mr. Wayne. If you remember that in 2012. And of course, New York Mets equal 246 as well, and it's the 246th year of the United States. But it could just be showing the Astros. There's something important. In 2017, there was a big twin theme that involved Wendy's, and we got the Wendy's lady changing their mascot to the gray hair. And the same day that they did this, the Astros and the Twins played. And it's like the Astros won in 2017 when I was following that big twin narrative. And then they played the Twins on that day. It's like, it just seems to be connected to them. And I'm honestly surprised it was on August 25th, because the big theme I've been following with Wendy's for years is August 26th. So I can't believe that they had that on August 25th and not August 26th. But the Colin Kaepernick story, I think, was also on August. It wasn't on August 26th. They did it like one day off of like the day that he originally took a knee. So maybe there's a theme going on there with like being one day off of stuff. But I will leave it there. I really need to go to bed. Have a good one. Peace.